Okay. So, welcome to Tips and Tricks for Character Creation. This panel is not only about. This panel is for not just how to create a character in D&D, but just general speaking character creation. You know, how to create a character in, say, a piece of literature, but also how to create a tabletop character, so on and so forth. So, when it comes to creating a character, it's kind of a daunting process because I suspect nobody wants to make a bad character. Nobody wants to make a lame character. So, when it comes to making a character, how does one create an interesting character? How does one create a character that not only will they enjoy, but others will enjoy as well? I should add the caveat that I don't consider myself an extreme expert in this field, but I've played enough NPCs and I've played enough characters that I've come to realize there's a few general trends. First off, when you're creating a character, you have to ask yourself, what do you like in a character? Like, you know, when you watch something, when you see something, you remember a certain character that you like. What was it about that character that you enjoyed? Did they have a good sense of humor? Were they very sympathetic? Was there a certain mannerism you enjoyed? So on and so forth. I find that to be a helpful starting point. Particularly, I find characters that are a little more meek and humble to be somewhat popular nowadays. And when you're creating a character, what's important to remember is your character is more than just that little character trait. Because with us, as regular people, we all have strong character traits. And, for example, taking myself, admittedly, I like to talk. It's just, I'll admit it. I'm out there. I'll admit, I like to share myself talk. I said it. That said, though, it's not my dominating character trait. I also try to be very empathetic towards others. I try to express interest in other people. Now, I'm not trying to praise myself. Forgive me if it sounds like that. But rather, what I'm getting at is there's more, of course, to a character than just their one character trait. Because there's a reason people are the way they are. There's a reason why people who are soft-spoken have trouble speaking. It could be that because growing up they're ridiculed. It could be that they don't have much to say and they choose to be quiet. It could be that they're not comfortable with their own voice. And all these factors will determine their character traits and how they act and perceive and interact with the world. And as a result, if you keep that in mind, it will keep your character from becoming a shallow character who only has one character trait. I'll take a moment to talk about MLP because I actually do feel it's worth mentioning. So with it, one of the things about the show that always sort of impressed me was the fact that the characters were more than just their shallow archetypes. Each of them had, of course, a strong dominating character trait, but they were more than just that. They were, in a sense, complete characters. And as a result, some of the characters I liked and some of them I didn't because of their main character traits. So when designing your own character, keep in mind your character has a life. Your character has gone through experiences. Your character has a history. How has that history helped mold them? How has that history helped shape them and become who they are? And give me a second, just thinking real quick. And I want to shift gears real quick to something a little more focused. So when you're coming up with a character, things that are typically not liked about characters are characters who have an answer for everything. This is true even with regular people. If you think about it, if you ever talk to someone who seems to have an answer for everything you come across, and not necessarily in a good way. Not like, let's say, a satisfying answer that makes you feel good, but every time, like, if you're just ribbing each other or poking fun at each other or something like that, your friend always has, just will not concede. Like, they always have to be right. They always have to be so on and so forth. And same thing with a character. If your character has an answer to every single situation that could come up, then people are going to not be overly interested in that character. Even if they say have the ability, like let's take Superman for example. Superman, technically speaking, I'm not a huge, I don't know everything there is to know about Superman, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But the general concept is what I'm approaching here. So, speaking of Superman's abilities, he technically has an answer to every situation that comes up. So so instead, to make him interesting, what you gotta focus on is his character. What happens if you put him in a situation that he doesn't know the answer to? He doesn't know which of his abilities to use. That's when things become interesting. But if he constantly has an answer, everything, he knows exactly what to do, and everything he does is right, it just becomes boring, and sometimes just quite frustrating. Now, another thing I find when it comes to making a character is how they treat others and why they treat them that way. Now, some people like characters who are jerks. And some people like characters, some people just really love villains. And I think a large part has to do with how they approach it and why they're a villain. Villains who are evil just for the sake of being evil, or I should even rescind that. If your villain does evil acts because your villain needs to do evil acts, but there's no real personality, no real investment of their character behind their actions, people will probably pick up on that. And they'll be like, why is this? There's no character of this character to explain why they're doing this. I mean, if your character literally enjoys being a villain, like that's what they enjoy doing, their actions, what they say, how they say it, everything will revolve around the fact that this is their favorite thing to do. And as a result, first, if your villain enjoys stealing candy from babies, they will have developed skills, the personality for it, and they will have developed several different ways they can go about it, so to sort of keep it fresh, and so they can play with their craft and enjoy their craft. And then, of course, sympathetic villains are usually pretty popular as well. But really, at the end of the day, I think when it comes to villains, what's most important is that what they're doing is a natural extension of who they are. They're doing these things because that's, to them, the logical course of action to take. Or they feel bound by some necessity, some need to do so, even if they don't necessarily want to do it. Versus doing it just because the story says so, or doing it just because you as the player or the writer wants them to do it. And I feel, and I suspect that audiences can pick up on that authenticity. Now, to shift gears again, let's talk about creating characters for tabletop games. When you're creating a character for the tabletop game, depending on the nature of the tabletop game, you'll either be playing this character for a very long time or very briefly. First off, I think when you want to figure out the type of character you want to play and how to design them, I think you should find out a couple of things. One, how long is the game going to last? And two, what is the nature of the game? Specifically, the sort of game you're getting into. Is it a silly game? Is it like super serious? Is it a tragedy? Is it a comedy? Like, what are the other players like? What is your game master or dungeon master like? Because if, say, for example, you bring the Joker into Bozo's Fun Park, the campaign, it's not going to work. Because Bozo's the Funberg campaign is all about lighthearted fun, and you're literally trying to kill people with laughing gas. Doesn't really work. So I find it helpful to... Yes, that is fun, but that's beside the point. I find it helpful to match your character with the general tone and nature of the campaign that you're in. That way, you have fun playing your character, and other people will enjoy your character as well. Because if you find yourself playing a character that doesn't fit in the world that you're playing in, chafing will begin happening, and eventually people are, you or the DM, someone's going to get uncomfortable with this arrangement. So that said, once you've figured out sort of the general tone of it, then ask yourself, well, what do I want to play? Which is not an easy question to answer. Maybe you know exactly what to play. Maybe you want to play a swashbuckler. Maybe you want to play a technomancer. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I had a very poor choice for breakfast. Alright, moving on. So, what I would say is find a character concept that sounds like something you might enjoy doing. I'd also make a pitch for party composition. See what your other party members are making and what they're doing, and then try and help balance it out. Because a team of all characters who are focused on killing people just isn't going to work very well. It's helpful to have some people who actually do some healing, or people who are designed to take damage. But even so, what do you think would be fun to play within this world setting? I once played a bard, as I mentioned in the previous panel, who was a scumbag, and he was a silver tongue, and he got himself in and out of trouble all the flipping time. Now, there are many times I got myself in situations where I didn't know what to do. My character probably would have, but I sure as heck didn't know what to do. And sometimes you'll find that happens. Sometimes you'll encounter situations where you feel your character would act one way, but you yourself are disposed to act a different way. And sometimes you'll create a character and you'll discover after you've created that character, this isn't actually the character that you wanted to be. You didn't work out as well as you thought it would. Let's say that unfortunate situation happens. What I find the best thing to do is to approach your game master, your dungeon master, and say, hey, I know we've started, and we're a few sessions in, but I just don't like my character. This is not what I thought it would be. I'm not having fun, I'm not enjoying this character. Would it be okay if I made a new character? I still want to play, I still want to be here, I'm not liking this guy. Or gal, for that matter. And hopefully your GL will be like, alright, I get where you're coming from, sure, let's find some way of either, getting the character out of the story, killing him off, whatever have you. Sometimes, however, you'll get DMs like me who make the mistake of well, it's too late, stick with your character, and force them to keep playing it anyways. Yeah, I learned my lesson. Because sometimes it happens. In fact, I recently found myself playing a character where that was exactly the case. Actually, that's another thing. When you go to create your character, go in with the intention of making that character. Using a recent example, I am currently in a game at the moment where the original concept I had was a very warm and friendly healer who sort of, mechanically speaking, they were a healer, but they wandered the lands and they would create a bonfire out of magic and invite people to come and sit down and chat and just be a very surprisingly warm and friendly character who traveled the lands easing the pain and suffering of others. Problem is I realized that mechanically speaking and flavor-wise, it just didn't work. Because my character had 11 hit points. And ain't no character with 11 hit points gonna have a background of wandering the wilds. It's just not gonna work. So what happened is I changed, kind of last minute, I changed a lot of the mechanics but I still had too many leftovers of the previous character. So when I finally finished this character, I had no idea what to play. I had a finished character, game time started, and I didn't know what to do with this character. I just had a character, I didn't know who it was anymore. So for a while, I didn't have any fun playing this character. Eventually, though, thankfully, because of the dice, I found a way to play a character that's actually a lot of fun. But I would say go in with a clear vision of what you want to go with. And if that vision turns out to be bad, well, trust me, it's better than going in with half a vision. Now, when you're writing your character's backstory, a good backstory isn't a novel. A good backstory should tell pretty much what your character has been doing up to that point. Maybe why your character is the way they are. How did they get to where they are? How did they get up to that point? What have they been doing? Why are they the class that they are? Is there anybody important in their previous history? Because backstories, ultimately speaking, are a source of information. As far as your GM is concerned, your GM needs to know, okay, are there any important people in your back history? Are there any important events? Are there any critical flaws or any interesting hooks I can use with this character? Why is your character the class they are? And as you create your character's backstory, basically give the GM plenty of material to work with. Maybe they're looking for a lost relative. Maybe that's why they became an adventurer. Perhaps they were kicked out of their society and now they're wandering the lands just trying to stay alive and they don't know why they got kicked out. Perhaps they have a great curse and they don't know what to do about the curse. Or perhaps they know the solution and they're on a quest to try and find that solution. If you have a character backstory that's very, bland, like, oh, they left town because they were bored. As a DM, I look at that and say, okay, well, I can't really engage them. I can't really engage the player or the character in the story using their backstory. So everything I have to do, I have to create characters and events that this player has to be interested in and then work with that. It also tells the players and your DM how your character works and feels in situations. If, for example, you just detail in your backstory that your character is, we'll say, a thief who doesn't want to be a thief, but they do it because life has forced them to become that way. Then your GM, after they read that, will say, okay, so they steal to survive, but they don't necessarily want to steal. So perhaps some of the best ways I can motivate this character as far as like the events are concerned and other characters are concerned is not so much with the draw of lucre and loot, of lucre, money, and whatever have you, but perhaps with characters who are more sympathetic, characters who are also trapped, who that character can see as being trapped in their own world, their own skin. Wait, that's not the right way to say it. Prisoners of circumstance. There we go. And say, for example, there's another character who, for some reason, enjoys fighting. Perhaps they feel that fighting is a way of not only is a good pastime, but it's a good wholesome activity. We're not necessarily saying like they enjoy killing people, but they enjoy, say, a good tavern brawl. They enjoy, fisticuffs and just beating each other until you both fall down and start laughing and then basically hug each other afterwards, right? Well, there's a reason that character enjoys being a brawler. And what happens when that character comes across someone who takes fights too far? What happens when they come across, an aristocrat who decides that public brawling should be outlawed for petty reasons? So when you're creating your character's backstory, it's important to incorporate, I believe, things that will allow the dungeon master to emotionally invest not only your character what's going on, but you as well. Because after all, your character is sort of an extension of you. We all want our characters to do well. That said, it's also been said, don't put too many things in. Don't sit there and be like, just create a wall of hooks for your DM to take, because then they'll just look at that and be like, I don't even know what this character is. Like, I have too much to work with. As far as what a good balance is, I don't know if I can really give a hard number on that. I would say, and this is me spitballing a little bit, I'd say maybe a couple of really big hooks. Maybe like two major things the DM could latch on to really get your character and you interested in what's going on. And maybe like 3 or 4 other smaller details that they could utilize. For example, there's a character I had who was separated from his family. He didn't know where they are, he didn't know anything about them, and he didn't expressly state that he was looking for his family. It was just part of the backstory. As a DM, I had the perfect opportunity to explore that. I could have brought that in, and that would have been a very emotional moment for that character. And then I could have used that family to basically motivate the character and the player one way or the other. But ultimately speaking, I felt that I didn't feel that was going to fit into the story that I had planned. Which brings you to another point. When you're planning your character's backstory, another reason I say don't put too many things in is because your GM may not get to them all or may not wish to incorporate them. Now, a good DM GM, in my opinion, will at least incorporate some of your backstory into the story, depending on the nature of the campaign. I mean, if you're just doing the series of dungeon crawls, or the campaign isn't really interested in long-term character development, then that probably isn't going to be a thing. But if it is, the DM or GM may not incorporate what you want for them to incorporate, and may not necessarily incorporate everything that you have there. That's why I say don't have too much, but don't have too little. And if the GM decides, the GMs probably won't tell you what they're going to use or not going to use, because that would be spoilers. But if they don't have a certain trait or a certain aspect of your background or your character trait that they incorporate into the game session, I would say don't let it worry you too much. Or I should say don't let it dishearten you. Because oftentimes when we design our backstories, we don't fully grasp the world that we're going into. We don't necessarily 100% grasp the tone, nature, and the scope of what we're doing. So sometimes we'll inadvertently design backstories that just don't fit as well into what's going on as would have been ideal. Which is fine. It's just, if you decide that your character is an interdimensional being and the world setting is, caveman times, then if the DM decides not to bring other dimensional beings into the world setting because they felt that wouldn't be appropriate, you can't really blame them too much for that. In fact, they might ask you to not do that if you wouldn't mind changing your backstory a little bit. Which is another thing. Negotiating with your DMs, GMs about your backstories. Because inevitably, you're going to come up with concepts that you think are the coolest things on the planet. And they may be. Don't take me saying that they're not. I just, maybe they are flipping cool. And basically, your GM's like, I'm not, this section here, I'm not feeling it. Where do you know to stand your ground, and where do you know to concede? I'm not going to say I have a good answer for that. But I will say is you must be willing to compromise on just about everything with your character. If there's something that's absolutely non-negotiable, my advice would be to ask the DM or GM about it ahead of time. Say, hey, this is something I really want to do with my character. This is important to me. Before I write it down, is this going to work? And then work with your GM to try and find some way of making it work. If it's completely incompatible with those settings, to use the earlier example, if the GM's like, no, I'm not okay with interdimensional beings popping in to my campaign, then I think you're just going to have to make a choice. But admittedly, I'm speaking a little bit from the DM side of things versus the player side of things. Now, I think that is everything I can think of off the top of my head, and it's talking about tips and tricks for character creation. I'll go ahead and open the floor to any questions anybody has, and I'll offer my thoughts and opinions. And of course, you can use text or speech to do so.
Okay. So, did you talk about if you have something in your backstory that's technically a secret, if it's better to have it be open and public knowledge out of character or not?
I think secrets are perfectly okay. If you can keep a secret, that's fine. But I would say don't keep any secrets from your GM or DM, because depending on the nature of the GM DM. Because I mean, to be honest, as GMs, sometimes we like to be surprised. But if it's a really important secret, I think secrets are okay. Just make sure you work with your GM or DM to make sure that secret works. And as far as is it better to make it publicly known ahead of time, I think that really falls upon you as the player's decision. I think dramatically speaking, it's more interesting if it remains a secret that just you and your GM or GM share, and then it gets revealed at a nice climactic pinnacle moment. That said, if you want to reveal it, say on your character sheet, but still have it be a secret in game, that's fine. But do keep in mind what that will do. Excuse me a second. Is it may make it difficult for the fellow players to treat your character as if they don't know that piece of information, which is sort of the nature of the secret. Now,
but if your character has talons for feet, don't you think the other players would notice?
Hush you.
What are you talking about? Oh, talons for feet. Oh, yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah. That sounds pretty good.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just want to mention I'm super sad because I missed a good chunk of that because someone called me on the phone.
That's okay. That's why I recorded all this, or why I'm recording it. But like I said, any questions?
What's your favorite kind of character to create?
Ooh, that is a fun question. I've played a lot of different characters. I think my favorite characters are the bold and brash characters. I spent a lot of time being sort of the party thinker and being the party leader. That it's nice to play a character who doesn't have to think too hard, is bold and brash, just charges in there, just loud, obnoxious. I think right now that's the sort of character I like to play and build. Of course, that said, I haven't really played a character in a while, and as of late, I find it difficult to be a player, but I think that's just because I've become a bit too used to being a DM. It's difficult to say. So that would be my favorite type of character, would be the bold and brash characters, but also characters that allow me to tap into very serious and very heavy RP moments. To me, my favorite moments when I'm playing a character are the really serious, heavy moments where I'm bearing that character's soul, and it's a very emotionally touching scene. Or at least that's...
You mean literally or figuratively?
Sometimes both. For example, one of my favorite scenes to date was... I was visiting a friend, and he was running a campaign, and he said, hey, can I... And they were running a session that night, and he said, hey, can I hop in for just that session? He's like, yeah, sure. and they're trying to figure out how to incorporate me. And they just captured an enemy commander. Like, they'd just gone through this combat with this enemy commander, and the enemy commander had spent the entire time trying to kill the party, and they knocked him unconscious, and we decided that I would be that enemy commander, right? Which immediately was a really awkward because I totally didn't know like what that commander said or had any context, but that's not the point. The point is they woke up the commander, and Ezreal IRP'd waking up, and that's a funny story into itself. But that's another time. That's for that's for 115. That's for after the trivia. Anyways, during the conversation, they were talking to him, and he turned to them and said, with anger and deep sadness in his voice, "Do you think I don't care about the lives of my men? Do you think I do this because I enjoy watching people die?" And in that moment, the whole dynamic shifted. In that moment, they realized that this commander wasn't actually a villain, but that he was working for a villain. That he was essentially being that, he was just a captain in an army. That's all he was. He was just doing his job. And I think ultimately speaking, he ended up betraying the bad guys and serving like a rebel faction after that or something like that. But that was one of my favorite moments, even though I got to play the character like I think twice maybe. Because that's what I like to do. That's what I enjoy playing. Those to me are the real nuggets of RP, is when things are like super serial and emotional and really intense. Which actually brings out an interesting question for you guys. Are there any type of characters you yourselves would like to play? I cut off, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Are there any types of characters you guys would like to play?
You cut off again in the same place.
Yeah, I
You
did.
would like?
Are there any types of characters you guys would like to play?
There's just so many.
That we're not already playing?
I don't know if you guys noticed, but like the kinds of characters that I like playing are the ones that sort of like twist on the general idea of the character. Like for example, a unicorn that doesn't know magic, or like in your Roan campaign, a griffin who doesn't like the caste system, stuff like that.
Well, there's counterculture characters are always a lot of fun. Halfling barbarians, orc wizards, so on and so forth.
Good predators? No such thing.
All predators are evil. And then since we're here, is there anybody here that has a character concept that they would like to make, but they don't know how to go about it and would like some advice? Should I repeat myself? Did I cut out?
No, we heard it.
No, you're
It's
good.
just our question.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That's a loaded question then.
A character that will completely offend you.
That's not hard. Spoilers, that's not hard.
Be you. I mean,
Can you ever create a character that's like knows meta?
They are made. It's just that it really depends on the campaign that you're.
I think it depends on how you play it off. Like, it's like I was talking about earlier with character traits. If it's something that you do just because you can, or just because like you want to, and it doesn't really make sense for your character, or anything like that, then I don't think it really works. But if say with your character, like you want this character to make meta cracks and basically be Deadpool, then I would say be okay with the world around them being like, what the heck are you talking about? and then not being obnoxious about it. I think the real key about it is that you are not obnoxious about it, and that you never take the joke too far.
Look, alternatively, you could find an in-universe explanation. Like, they could low-key be metagaming because they're Oracle.
I mean, there is that too, I guess. But if your Oracle starts spouting about, like, don't worry, I got a +5 to this, I got it, then I might call some shenanigans on that.
No, he'll be, and then he'll just come up with the fact that there's a godly standard, and he knows it because he's an Oracle.
Sure. But I guess if there's no,
Based on past experience points.
I mean, I guess if there's no other like further questions or anything like that about
What, did you ask us a question?
I did, but nobody answered it.
Hard question to answer.
Scorch.
Go ahead and explain Scorch a bit to give context.
So basically, I was making a character because I saw that warlocks could at will like disguise self. I thought that would be cool, and I was gonna make a character around it. And then I rolled a 4 on wisdom. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna roll with this. I rolled a 4, and I was like, where should I put it? Wisdom. So instead, he's like completely like just stuck up and egotistical to the point where it's a flaw. And I want to play the character, but I want to play him in a way that he'd be likable, and that's where I have a hard time. Is balancing being likable and being an egotistical jerk.
Well, you can be an egotistical jerk and still likable.
But the question,
yes, it's just hard.
Question is how to do that. So with that, I think a large part of it has to do with how you treat the world around you and your fellow players.
Oh, he's also chaotic evil.
I have opinions about evil characters, but we'll save those for another time.
I really want to make a new character.
Well, okay, actually, first off, when you're playing an evil character, depending on your approach of evil and depending on your interpretation thereof, it is very difficult to do evil characters as team players. Because at the end of the day, this is a team game, and you're working with other people. So whatever you do when you play your character, you want to make sure that you're not impeding on other people's fun. Now, I actually once played a character who, I guess, arguably speaking, he might have been neutral evil at the start. It really, probably more towards the neutral and less on the evil side. And he was a high elf from Feylands, and he actually was a minor noble, and he treated everybody, including the other party members, like garbage. He's an absolute jerk to all of them. And in the first few sessions, the first session especially, was just intolerable. The way you worked around that, though, is a couple of things I did. One, of course, was character growth. Throughout the course of the adventure, he realized that other beings weren't actually lesser creatures, but rather, that the other races had validity to their existence. And he very slowly became to accept that. One of the things I accelerated was the way he treated his fellow party members. As quickly as I could, I basically stopped looking down at them and insulted them. Because the moment you actually do that, and your character means it, many players will take that personally. Because when you're RPing a character, you're investing a part of you into that. Even if the insult isn't meant for you as the player, there's a very real chance that if you're insulting your character, it's going to bleed into the person. So, one thing I did is, I adapted my character to stop treating like that, and then as we went along, He'd treat others poorly, but he never like. But eventually, he learned to respect them. Except one time when we were around a bunch of dwarves, he just shut down and refused to interact with them. And my GM's like, "Why are you doing this?" I'm like, "It's in character." Plus, I just didn't want to. Plus, I was just tired that night. And didn't want to RP. That's beside the point. So, with your character, what I would recommend is first off, whatever you do, do not harm your fellow players. Don't cause them pain, duress, unless, of course, you have the understanding that that's kind of the case, and then even then, only go as far as you guys sort of agree upon.
So define harm.
Any action taken against them that will impede their ability to have fun. Be it, say, a charm gaze, be it deliberately damaging their character, be it taking resources from them. Whatever harms their ability to enjoy the game is something you should never do. One of the worst things I've ever seen was a guy who would constantly use diplomacy checks to try and get other people to do things he wanted them to do. And he'd roll really high, and then basically he would say, "But I rolled it at a certain number here," and somehow expect the other people to do exactly what he told them to do.
No. You see, that's where Lesser Geas is fine. I mean, I've never done that.
So, unless of course the other players are cool with it, then that's an entirely different story. Second, make sure that he is never, what's I'm looking for, annoying. You can be brash, you can be loud, you can be a braggart, you can be foolhardy, but remember at the other end of the day that other people are on the receiving end of that. So rather than making it can be a character flaw, but don't make it a playstyle flaw. Or more accurately, a hindrance, I think might be a better word for it. Because if you start letting that really completely control the way you play that character, and that becomes like the main thing that they are, and something all people can think about when they think about Scorch is that arrogant dickbag who nobody else can interact with on any normal level, then it's not going to work. Which actually brings me to another thought. Your character has to be able to be interacted with. If interactions with that character are always unpleasant on the end of the person who's trying to interact with them, that person's never going to interact with them. Scorch is, say, always right in every situation, or is always insulting, or is always, putting them down, or always talking about how much greater he is, or whatever have you. Eventually people will stop talking to him because doing so is an unpleasant experience. So playing a braggart can be fine as long as it's not overbearing and it doesn't impede the other player's ability to enjoy themselves. And if you isolate yourself as a character because you make it very difficult to interact with your character, I think you yourself, ultimately speaking, will find yourself unwanting to play that character.
Yeah, preferably it would be the other way around.
How do you mean?
His interactions would hopefully be fun.
So, that would be my general advice, is to keep in mind how other people are feeling about it and receiving it. Always keep in mind your fellow players whenever you're portraying flaws like that. As vague as that advice is.
Okay.
Anything else? Or anything for anybody else?
You mean like a character that we guys want to make?
Mm-hmm. Any character concepts you've been wanting to play, but you're just not sure how you would do so? Well, if not, and there's no further questions, I'm gonna go ahead and call that a panel then. So that was tips and tricks for character creation.